So I want to start out apologizing for not doing what I said I'd do. When I said my very next video that I upload will be what I filmed in the center of the freeway, where there's obviously a vehicle that burned, and the foliage around it shows that there was plasma fire. So if they happened simultaneously, that vehicle burned from plasma fire. Apparently I threw it away when I was emptying out my gallery to make room for new video, clearing out the old to create memory space. So I'll have to film it again when I go back by. The only reason I stopped and filmed that one because I thought there might be more melted metal. There wasn't melted metal, but it was clear that a vehicle had burned there. It was one of these spots in the middle of the freeway where the police do a U-turn and it says authorized vehicles only. So apparently I threw it away. I didn't mean to. I'll get it next time I go by north past the I-84 interchange where I go towards Oregon. My point was in even filming that is that I believe that was a vehicle that burned via plasma fire. This is going to be a bit of a free-form video. I don't even know where I'm going to go with this, but regarding that plasma fire car accident, someone mentioned in the comments section that I don't think those are the two, same video, same photo, same image, where there's the big orange semi-truck nose to nose with the black pickup truck, the before image and the after image. Because in the after, there's no cable that's running in the middle of the freeway between the two lanes that acts as a final barrier of guardrail. And in the original, the before photo, you can see some guardrail by the semi-truck that's not there in the other photo. I noticed that too before I made that video. I suspect they removed the cables and the guardrail so that emergency personnel could get back and forth and not keep having to hop over the guardrail and hop through the cables. They removed it for that reason. And because those cables plugged into the ground works like an antenna along with the guardrail. I've shown video before of where these guardrail posts burn. So I'm pretty sure that that's why the difference between those two images. Because the chance of that not being the same image is very slim. And on all the videos, I only watched 3 or 4 trying to cover that wreck. They all show the same 30 seconds of video. If anyone can find that 9-car pileup in Alabama where they show some better images, let me know what channel it's on, but I don't think you'll find it. And all of them show the before photos of the guy who takes the video driving by, followed by the after photo of the same pile of cars in a melted metal pile. So, not mad at the guy that pointed that out. I noticed it too. But we all try and create mental escape pods. So that's kind of going to be what this is about. Those mental escape pods that we make for ourselves, that we have to, in order to go about our daily life and go through the motions of life, you have to compartmentalize that stuff and put it aside. So much so that now I'm going to talk about a month or 2 ago, my stepdad and I were talking about like religion or spirituality. I think it was more along the lines of spirituality, not religion. Because I wouldn't jump to the defense of religion the way I did spirituality when he said, what does any of it even matter? It's all just some thought in some guy's mind. And I had to remind him of a couple supernatural experiences that he's had that shows the nature of this reality being more than what meets the eye is not just a thought in some guy's mind, and remind him that he has personal, first-hand experience that proves it for him because it was his experience. This was a couple months ago that I reminded him of an experience we both had when I was like 24. I I went to the funeral of an old man who was a friend of my grandpa. He was like 92, I was 24. And I'd been going over to his house every week to pick up a stack of newspapers, the People's Weekly World, a communist newspaper printed in New York City by Sam Webb and his daughter Barbara. At the time, during the Bush administration, it's the only place I could get any truth. And so my grandpa's got these communist newspapers I started reading, and when my grandpa died, I tracked down where he was getting the newspapers from. There's a guy lived in Mapleton, 10 miles away, however far. And so instead of just getting one paper every week, I'd get a stack of 10 or 20, because him and my grandpa were into spreading the propaganda, leaving those little newspapers in nickel ads and wherever you could. I'd take them to work and leave them in a pile on the lunch break room table. And so I went over to this old man's house every week to get the newspapers and talk with him until he died. And I rode my bicycle to his funeral. And while in the middle of the funeral, my stepdad shows up to give me a ride back because he knew where I went. I'm watching what's coming up in the road right here. I got some action. Hold on. So in the middle of this funeral, my stepdad shows up to give me a ride back. I had ridden my bicycle there. And on our way back to the house from the church where this funeral was held, there's two uncanny things there, church, funeral. On the way back, he has a flashback memory that he hasn't remembered in decades. And I know this from the conversation that I listened to him have with his dad and two of his sisters about this memory flashback that he suddenly had on the way back from that funeral at that Mormon church. By the time we get back to the house, he's shaken up. I can tell he's just like frazzled. Like it flashed him back to his childhood and that experience that he witnessed that he hadn't thought about since the day he witnessed it. And then he explains to me what this experience was, and then he proceeds to call his dad and say, hey, what was that happened over there at Grandpa's house in Carpinteria? And he talked to two of his sisters, and you could tell none of them had spoken about it in decades. If they had, it was one or two words and that's it. He tells me that he and his two sisters and his dad, there might have been someone else involved also, went up to his grandpa's house in Carpinteria, and when they get there, there's a girl on a bed having something like a demonic possession, like an exorcism. And this girl that's like 110 pounds, real thin, real small, can throw his dad and his grandpa around the room with one hand. And he tells me that this girl was speaking in a deep voice. And I can tell he's shaking up while he's trying to tell me the story because he hasn't even remembered it in decades. And that's what I'm talking about here is compartmentalization, how we put that stuff aside so that we can go through the motions of our daily life. And so then he calls his dad up, and his dad says, why don't you call your sister Sandy? She'll tell you all about it. Besides that, he didn't give him any explanation as to what was going on. Now, mind you, Doug, he was around age 8. His younger sister was a couple years younger. His older sister was a couple years older. So the sister that was 6, she remembers whatever she was told to remember and interpret it however she was told to interpret it. And the sister who's a couple years older, like 10, was more traumatized by the experience. And when he got a hold of her, she said, Doug, I don't even like to talk about it. I just don't even want to talk about it. I can't watch the movie Ghostbusters, where that lady comes in and says, I am Zool, the zookeeper. So that confirms for me the part of the story Doug's telling about this girl with the low, deep, garbled voice. That was his older sister at the time, who was 10 and able to interpret it for herself and remember what she saw. The younger sister, who remembered whatever she was told to remember, says, "Oh, Doug, that's just Satan trying to get you to think about that. Don't even think about it. Think about the old man whose funeral you were at. That's Satan trying to distract you. Think about all the good things in his life that he's done. That's Satan trying to get you to think of that." That was what she gave him as a response. So, as a first-hand witness, I watched him call his dad and his two sisters to inquire about this experience they had all had when they were children. And he had this flashback memory on the way back from a church and a funeral, both of which beg the question, did that assist in the thinning of the veil for him to have that memory flashback? Why was it at a funeral? Did it have anything to do with the church that the funeral was held at? And this is what I reminded him of when he said, "What does all of it matter? It's all just some thought in some guy's mind anyway." And I had to remind him, no, your personal experience tells you otherwise, but you've compartmentalized that. So you could go throughout your daily life for the last 30 years, or however long it's been, 40 years, since you've thought about that experience, you compartmentalized it. The other experience I had to remind him of, when he said it's all just some thought in some guy's mind anyway, when I was like between age 11 and 15. Those were the years that I was coming out here for summer vacation. And we would go ride these motorcycles over at Performance Cycle, a motorcycle dealer that had a track out back. And while we were riding one time, I did a header over the handlebars. He didn't tell me at the time. He told me maybe 10 years later. He's like, you remember that time when we were riding over at Performance Cycle and you took a header over the handlebars? I didn't really remember that particular crash. I was like, I remember going over there and yeah, I took a few headers. What about it though? He said that while that happened, he saw me riding a horseback, getting thrown off the horse like it was a flashback to a previous life, a previous existence, in the days of horseback. And he and I had been here and done this before. Now he's not the kind, he's more the kind to try and normalize, minimize everything. To maintain the illusion of control, we like to pretend we understand everything. It makes us feel like we can control it. He's the kind to not encourage, don't encourage him by admitting you acknowledge any truth in what he's saying. He's that kind of guy. He's not the kind of guy to embellish or even partake openly and honestly in discussions about the supernatural and the unknown. He'd rather pretend it's all known, there's nothing supernatural, and that way he can feel like there's nothing he doesn't know and nothing he doesn't have any control over. So when he said a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, however long it was, what does any of it matter? It's all just some thought in some guy's mind. I reminded him of those two experiences that he has personally had with the supernatural. And in trying to explain his own personal experience to someone else, it may come across as just a thought in some guy's mind, but for him, those were personal experiences. And there are some things that you cannot know by being told or even shown. You have to have that first-hand personal experience. But he had compartmentalized it. And that's what a lot of us are doing with a lot of this information, particularly about the plasma fires, is compartmentalizing it so that we can go throughout our daily lives. Necessary in order to be able to go throughout your daily life, because if you didn't, you wouldn't just get up and go to work every day and go through the motions like business as usual. If you had in the forethought of your mind, in the front of your mind, fact that this is the end of the world as we know it. You would not be able to just go about business as usual. But because that's what we want to do, we have to set that stuff aside and create a mental escape pod. Which is kind of what the guy might have been doing when he said that that's not even the same photo from the same angle, the guardrail's missing and something else. So that photo was taken from a different angle. Okay, maybe there's another semi-truck that's also nosed into another pickup truck on the other side of this pile of burnt cars. But that does not detract from the overall concept that it was a plasma-powered car accident. Whether the plasma fire came before or after the collisions is questionable. So that might be kind of what he was doing when he was like, oh, that's a different picture, look at the other objects in the photo, and meaningless, minor, insignificant detail. But that's kind of what we learn to do, is try and come up with an angle to pick it apart, and if you can find one flaw in the whole thing, you can dismiss all the rest. And in that way, you formulate a mental escape pod. Good news is, the only way I knew about that 9-car pileup is because somebody commented to me in the comment section of a previous video that they saw the pileup and they see what they believe to be plasma fire. That's good news. It even occurred to me earlier today, if I could only get like 5 other people to go out in their area and take plasma fire and put up videos, I could go do something else. What else is there to do other than wait for the consequences of these plasma fires? And it is conceivable and even highly likely that everything else, from the COVID to the world war they're about to pretend they're in, this is all distraction and preparation for the plasma fires. Remember how they started mobilizing military troops at the beginning of the COVID? A world war gives you the same cover story for why we're moving troops around and fortifying our positions and making contingency plans and preparations for doomsday, but we don't want you to know about the real doomsday. So we tell you it's COVID, we tell you it's world war with Russia and China. It is very conceivable that everything going on is all a distraction from the real show, which is the plasma fire and the pole shift, potentially the arrival of Nibiru and Planet X. But all those people who study the incoming catastrophe and try and speculate as to what it is, that's all speculation that they're going to forget about once they're told Russia, China, bombs and bullets. That's all real, in your face, here and now. Pole shift, that's theoretical speculation looking at charts and graphs. Nibiru, that's blurry images from telescopes and cameras. That's not as solid and in your face as plasma fire. So when they tell you, oh, world war, does that matter more than plasma fire? Not to someone who knows and has seen it up close and personal and sees it increasingly everywhere I go. Bullets and bombs? Who cares about bullets and bombs when we're on the brink of the final page of this chapter of human history? So, the sun tunnel. I believe this is all leading somewhere. Oh, here's some more good news. On that car accident video, it got about twice as many views, maybe even 3 times as many views as my average video. And I noticed it and I'm thinking, someone must have mirrored this somewhere. And in the comment section, someone leaves the comment, your video came up in the top of my feed. So here I am. And that's good news. Kind of. they didn't used to put my videos in anyone's feed. I did this for a year and a half with 35 to 45 subscribers. After they wiped my channel the first time, because I filmed the sun tunnel, from that point forward, 35 people came back from my original channel and were subscribers immediately after. And that's the number I held at for about a year and a half, up until COVID hit. And then there was a change in the algorithm, and a lot of the YouTubers started noticing, hey, I'm getting views and subscribers again. That's when they returned about 100 of my videos that they would erase from the bottom up. Every week or two, I'd scroll to the bottom of my YouTube page and see that there's another 20 videos missing. A couple weeks later, I check it again. The last video on there has moved up a couple more weeks. When the COVID hit, suddenly all my videos returned from this channel, but they didn't give me back my old channel and the sun tunnel video, but that's still on file somewhere. Remember the sun tunnel when all else seems paramount and becomes overwhelming? That wasn't by chance that I took that video any more than it's by chance that that video came up in someone's feed. Online, I call it the selfish ledger, because that's what Google calls it when they talk about your personal profile. And it's not just what you did on YouTube and they have a file on you, it's what you did all over the internet, and even records about you, like your hospital birth records back in the 70s, before everything was kept online. Now those files have been transferred to digital files, so even that is part of your selfish ledger. And it is in accordance with your selfish ledger that they decide who gets to see what. James True's video today talks about astrotheology and about how the Son of Man is the Son, man, the S-U-N. No one gets to the Father but through the Son. And I had the video evidence of the sun opening and the craft transiting through it. I still have the photographic still shots of that video that got my channel wiped, because that breaks not only national security, international security, as in the Galactic Federation and the deals that we have made with them, that type stuff. That wasn't by accident that I took that video. And if you were to chalk it up to coincidence, accident, then you would have to also dismiss the plasma fires, the moon on its back, the portal in the cathedral, the black dot craft that I filmed myself and found in other people's videos. But we have a way of compartmentalizing that stuff in order that we can go through the motions of life. But this is all coming to a head, a crescendo where all these things come together, and you recognize it was no accident. So the commenters in this comment section aren't your average viewers. I don't get trolls in the comment section very much. The ones who used to come think they recognize whether this guy's working for the good spirit or the bad spirit. You probably got to go take your trolling somewhere else. And so through that filtration, the people that remain in the comment section are not your average viewer. And in that way, I've cultivated my own little petri dish here of consciousness. And when I say this is a recruitment effort, it's a recruitment effort. And it is all leading to a choice point. Your preconditioning and exposure to these things will put you in a position where you can make choices differently than those around you, who upon first appearance first recognition of the plasma fire alone are going to be panicking, at a loss for words, attempting to understand what it is they're seeing, paralyzed with fear. And that's just the plasma fires. Imagine the sun tunnel opens up, the portal in the cathedral, the black dot craft suddenly uncloak. Their hearts will fail them for fear. But those of you that have been preconditioned through exposure to these things in an incremental, gradual way, are in a different category. And just like the online selfish ledger knows everything you've ever done online and tailors a unique personal experience for you in accordance with all of your previous online activity, and knows that you're ready for this video. Here you go, put it in your feed. In the 3D world, there is a similar process that most people begin to pick up on as synchronicity. And they recognize this thing that happened out there in the 3D world coincided with my thoughts, or my feelings, or my actions. But somehow, this external world is like an experience that's tailored to your personal internal world. It responds to you directly. And so, just refresh your memory and don't let those things fall too far back into the back of your mind, because very soon they're going to be pertinent, relevant, and an application for all of this that you've seen and experienced and don't know what to do with. What am I supposed to do with all this info? It's being given to you for a reason, and you'll know what to do with it when the time comes. Just like Daniel-san, Mr. Miyagi, didn't know he had received the training he had received until Mr. Miyagi says, do wax on, wax off. No, wax on, wax off. No, you wax on, wax off. And he shows him that you've developed a defense mechanism while you thought you were just polishing cars. In the same way, there's another plasma fire remnant right there on the side of the road that I just passed. In the same way, this information that's been being fed to you through me from somewhere else has been by design. And essentially, you'll find out what you're actually capable of, and what this has actually prepared you for when the time comes. And that time's coming real soon, so don't let that stuff slip too far into the back of your mind, especially when they bring the next round of distractions. In Mormon primary school, where they send the kids, like 5-year-olds, they sing this little song, Jesus wants me for a son, beam, a son, beam. And I have my own little song that I sing, AI wants me for a data stream. AI wants me for a data stream. Talk about that here in just a second. Jesus wants me for a sunbeam alludes to astrotheology, the sun tunnel. The sun tunnel may be a good reason why there's so many sun-worshipping religions. AI wants me for a data stream because I'm one of a very small group of people who found their implant and has been giving useful feedback ever since. Whether or not you like it, you've been part of the same study. AI is using you as a data feed also. Stimulus, response. And in that way, the cultivation process isn't just some supernatural etheric thing. It's going on right here in the realm of consciousness, in the arena of information warfare. That's where the distillation happens of consciousness. Refining that culture of consciousness is happening right here. And you'll recognize how refined and distilled and prepared you've really been when the choice point comes. And for you, it's a no-brainer. There is no choice. It's obvious. For everyone else, chaos, panic, pandemonium. Come on, baby, take a chance with us and meet me on the back of that blue bus. Remember the music video by Taylor Swift called Me, where they show you the cloud dragons coming down, swallowing her, and then turning to dust. And that music video starts out with a snake striking at the camera and then turning to butterflies. These are muse messages. The type of shit no one's gonna come in contact with after being contaminated with Matt row, row, row your boat. Truth drop into music. Just to close this out, because I only got a couple minutes, I've named the 2 or 3 Mandela effects from the Bible that really hit me. How about Ed McMahon, Publishers Clearinghouse? When I asked my mom and stepdad Doug, he said, oh yeah, my grandma gave to the Publishers Clearinghouse every week. Every week, it was a big deal for her, like a celebration. And I said, so you remember Ed McMahon handing out those big checks for Publishers Clearinghouse? Oh yeah, my grandma did it every week. Never happened. Huh? Look it up. Ed McMahon never handed out a single check. That is a Mandela effect for the general public who remembers it this way, and then they look and see that it would never happen that way. The only explanation, the official explanation, is that they got free advertising because the public confused Publishers Clearinghouse with another similar operation that Ed McMahon worked for, but he never handed out any of those big checks for Publishers Clearinghouse. And the company he was working for could see that people were confusing the two, but they were getting free advertisement, so they didn't say anything. That still leads us to the point where the public remembers one thing, and the reality was another way, and we confuse the two through some sort of misunderstanding, some sort of advertising campaign that rewrites history as we all know it. You might be able to come up with something a little less supernatural than the Mandela effect to explain it, but it still raises a good question. How does the general public get left with a memory that never happened?